Welcome, my name's Jonathan Kay. This is a session on mastering sim navigation options in SimsUshare. Now, obviously, making navigation is one of the critical skills that you're going to need in doing virtual fireground walkarounds. So this 25-minute webinar is going to go over the basics of how you actually can navigate among locations. If you have questions, you can put a note in the chat or put a question in the Q&A. It should alert me about that, and I'll look to answer it toward the end of the session, but I'll check it out to see if there's something I need to stop at the moment. So, if you just have a single picture, you don't need any navigation. People already familiar with SimsUshare will notice this is our typical arrow cluster navigation. But if you're making a single picture, there's no need to navigate. Now, you'll also know that we in SimsUshare talk about each slide as a location, or each view. So, if you're just doing single picture, no need to make any kind of navigation. But obviously, SimsUshare is about doing walkarounds and walkthroughs and changing conditions. And so most likely you're going to want to have at least a few different locations or views. So if you think about it as a sequence of slides, like a PowerPoint slide, when you actually create your locations, you're creating basically slides. So you'll create one called Alpha, maybe Bravo, Delta, Charlie, whatever. And so the sim navigation, in a nutshell, is really just jumping among your slides. Pretty straightforward. Now, typically, you're going to use navigation to simulate what it's like on the fireground. So let's say you're looking at the Alpha side, going left would go to Bravo, going right would go to Delta. And so what we're going to be doing is showing how you can use the SimsUshare navigation elements to set up your walkarounds. As I mentioned, locations, sometimes I'll call them slides because it's easier to talk about them as a sequence rather than locations. But locations technically, or slides, can be either pictures of different physical locations, or they could be the same location just with a different condition. So for example, you could have a Bravo incipient slide, and then you can make another slide or location that has a Bravo knockdown or a Bravo extension or a Bravo defensive condition. Each of these are going to be different slides or locations. And so it's up to you when you're actually creating the navigation in your simulations to decide how each slide or location should jump to some other slide or location. So there's two basic reasons why you would want to change locations or slides. You want to change the view for some reason, they're moving to a different part of the scene, or you want to change the condition that's not done with timing. You could change it again from essentially like an incipient view to some sort of fire extension or some type of evolution that would be disjoint. So not something you would do by timing a smoke or a fire. So those two reasons, for these two reasons, you're either going to be changing the view or changing the condition state. Now, when you think about that with your scenario, it's a really good idea to map out where your different views are and how you would get to those views, and also what your different conditions can be. So we suggest making just a little table, and we have this simulation design document in one of the other lessons. It's just a simple thing which says here, how you help to map out your views and basically call them state or condition changes while you're designing the simulation. So what we suggest over here is putting your locations and your different conditions, and then documenting where does it go when you move forward, where do you want it to go when it moves left or right. And these are the typical arrow cluster, the arrow navigation and the cluster of arrow navigation. We're going to see there's another way of moving locations as well, but most likely you're going to be using this arrow cluster. And even though it's a bit artificial, the idea, as I like to emphasize, a lot of times your students aren't going to know how to navigate in a virtual environment. So having something simple, even if it's artificial, simple and consistent, just puts them more at ease. They know moving left is going to take them, let's say, from Alpha to Bravo, moving right. So it's not like they don't need to have full free range of motion. Using a simplified way, left, right, forward, up, down, things like that can be really most useful just to keep their expectations consistent. So getting to the just getting to the heart of what we're doing, there are three basic ways to change locations. You can create arrows, those sort of little red arrows on the navigation arrow cluster, and that probably is the simplest way. You can create walkarounds very rapidly. The second way we call location jumper, and that's almost like you're pulling an arrow off of that cluster and just putting it anywhere in the picture. Now right here, it's in the shape of a white arrow, but in a simulation, you can change that shape. You can even make this invisible. And why you'd make it invisible would be maybe you have a picture of a door, or we used a picture of a drone in another situation. The person thinks they're clicking on the door or a window or a picture, and really what happens is it's jumping to another location. So the location jumper is useful for having a sort of a special purpose slide changer. And location jumper also has a special property where it can be timed to jump. So whereas the arrows, you have to press on them, the arrows in the navigation cluster, you have to press on them or use a keyboard. I'll show you how that works. Location jumper can be set to go to after 10, 15, whatever number of seconds, transition to another slide. So you can automatically walk people through a scene or through conditions. And the third way of change location really is nothing about developing simulations. It's with the Command Training Center, the CTC, you can just pick people up and drag them over to a new location. But that does require that you are remotely controlling your participants. Well, let's talk about the most basic, the arrow cluster navigation, or an arrow navigation cluster. So the way that a participant will navigate is one of three ways. They'll either click on one of the highlighted arrows. They can use a keyboard shortcut. So you see over here, if you look at a key, well, if you look on your keyboard, if you have one now, you'll see the AWDX is kind of like a, it's mirrored over here, as you'll see. A is the left, that would be the equivalent to clicking on the left button. D is equivalent to clicking on the right button. W, the up button, and X is the down. And so these other keys like Q and E and C and Z, those activate the arrow. So that way you don't have to click, you don't have to on the computer click on the arrow. You can use your keyboard. Now, if you want to use the center semicircle arrows, you can use the up and down keys also on your keyboard. Now, another thing people are not familiar typically with is tap regions, and I'm going to show what that looks like. So if we're looking at SimsUshare right now, and let's say we're going to go and play a scenario, I'm going to go here to say Myrtle CTC. So right now here, you'll see we have, if I can click to go forward, I can click to go back, I can use the arrow key. I'm going to click on the D. D is equivalent to the right arrow, so I can do D again. So long as it's lit, I can use that arrow key. But now sometimes, I actually hid the menu here, so I'm going to go bring the menu back, show menu. That's a very useful thing to make your simulations more immersive. You can go here and hit hide menu. But there's a little button at the bottom left here, and that hides the navigation arrow. Now the key, when that's hidden, the cluster, I can still use the arrow keys. See, I can move right, I can move left, but I just don't see what I'm pressing. And this could be useful if you have some condition you want to change. Let's say you're using a middle button to change a condition, but you don't want to show someone that you're changing that condition. So I might hide the arrow key here and then just make myself move around with keystrokes. Now, if I hide the key, you can see that there are 10 different buttons. The tap region, kind of getting back to where I started this, when you hide this cluster, SimsUshare breaks up your screen into 10 different regions, and I can go here and say show tap regions. So you'll see here how these 10 regions mirror the 10 different spots in the navigation cluster. So it means when this is hidden, see, I can move left or right here, and I'll look at the tap region again. So if I now click in this area, that moves left, or I go to the right. And that's how I can use the tap regions to navigate. Now, what the purpose of the tap regions, we found that on mobile devices, iPads, Androids, iPhones, you're not seeing the cursor like you are here in Windows. And so if you're projecting your mobile device onto a screen and you don't want the person to see what you're doing, I want to, let's say, escalate the condition, then all you have to do is tap on the screen and that will take them to a new location. And that way, if you're projecting it on a bigger screen, your users aren't seeing where you're going, and that might just be a condition change. So if you had condition changes in here or movement, you can click on the tap region. And of course, if there is no navigation like here, there's no left, so clicking left doesn't do anything. But if I were hit that with the tap region, I would move that forward or back. So those are tap regions. Now, so how does a designer create these arrows? And there are three basic ways. You can use the walk-around maker, set individual arrows, and then we also show you how to clear all the navigation. So for example, let's go into SimsUshare here. Let me go into the different SimsUshare. Let's go back and look at this, I'll just have this house 1. So now in house 1, I have, let's take a look, I have made 4 different locations, an Alpha, Bravo, Charlie, and some living room. So if I hit play, right now I haven't put any navigation in here. So the way I was, let's say I want to make a walk around, which is most typically what people will do for structural firefighting. So I'm going to use the location menu and say walk around maker. Now, as we go through here, this button over here says clear all navigation. There is no navigation now. That's why it's not lit. We're going to get back to that when we see it. So when I'm making the walk around maker, on your left-hand side, you're seeing all the locations. Here we only have 4, but you could have 5, 10, 20, whatever number. And you're going to tell the walk-around maker which locations you want to use in the order, in a clockwise order. So I'm going to start with Alpha, and I click on the greater than sign, Bravo, and then Charlie. And I don't have a delta here, but now what's going to happen is now, notice as I put these in here, it's now going to say make loop. And when I say make loop, now if I actually hit play, it has added in each arrow, which we're going to show how to do individually. But for right now, when you make a walk around, this is the easiest thing to do. Okay, made a loop. I went left to Bravo. Now I'm going left to Charlie. And if I go back left, I'm going to be back now at Alpha. And similarly, Charlie right, right, right. So I didn't want living room as part of the walk around. And this was a really easy way to make my walk around. So that's how you use the walk around maker. But remember, we can actually set these arrows individually. And let's see how we do that. So for one thing, let's say I want to make let's say delta is blocked for some reason. So I don't want to allow someone like here to go over to the Charlie side. Let me say, actually over here, let me say that the Bravo side is, I actually do have a Bravo. So let me say delta side. Let's get that straight. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to remove one of the arrows. So this is where your set navigation comes in. So set navigation is keyed to each side. So here, notice this is where you have to read carefully as you're changing your navigation. Why having the location set up beforehand is really useful. So you're following something you've planned and documented. It's saying set navigation for Alpha. It says click on an arrow to set that direction. Well, left I want to go to Bravo, but I don't want right to go to Charlie, because let's say I have a blockage on my delta side. It's inaccessible. What I can do is I can set Charlie and then say remove this path. And now when I'm done, watch what happens. When I go here play, notice there is no arrow to go over to my Charlie. I have to actually circle this from Bravo. And now also notice here I am on Charlie, I have no arrow to go over to back to Alpha. Let's say it's blocked off over there. So that's how you remove a navigation arrow. Now how you set an arrow, let's say that I want to have an entrance here on Alpha. So what I do first is I go and make sure I'm editing the Alpha location. I go over and say set navigation. And after set navigation, now if we can read this carefully, set navigation or Alpha, click on an arrow, set that direction. So I'm at Alpha, I want to go forward and actually into my living room. Over here, the destination, you see this gives me all the destinations. And now notice Alpha is not in this list because I'm already at Alpha. So there's no reason to go from Alpha to Alpha. That's why some people sometimes realize, where's Alpha? Well, you're at Alpha, so that's why it's not showing. So it's saying once I click on the direction, choose the destination when forward's pressed, and I want living room. Once I click that, it's telling me Alpha forward goes to living room. So now I hit back, or actually I can hit done. And now as I hit play, you'll see the up arrow there goes forward and goes back. Now you notice it does go back. I didn't enter back in there. I didn't do the down arrow to go back. That kind of astute viewers will know that there's a special switch under here that says reciprocal navigation. That means if I set something going forward, then if this is set to true, then automatically make the opposite happen to get back from my destination. So let me go back and try this again. If I say click on, if I want to remove the forward, see it says forward there, I'm going to remove that path, and reciprocal will remove also the return path. But now if I say don't do reciprocal and I say just go forward and living room, now it's only going to go into the living room. It's not going to give me the path back. So if I go here and hit play, you'll see I'm here, it's giving me forward, but now once I'm inside, no way to go back. And this may be if you wanted to individually plot how your person is going to, the different arrows. So maybe the door is off to the left or something. So what I can do here in the living room is I can say, oh, well, because of the perspective, if they're in the living room, let me now go and set the navigation, make sure reciprocal is off. And let's say left is going to go back to alpha. And maybe right is going to go, I'm going to go right to Charlie. Actually, I think left, I got to set that again, right to alpha. Sorry, right to Charlie and left to alpha. So now, and reciprocal is off, so we're not going to have the return set for us. So now I'm in the living room. You'll see here, if I go left, I get to alpha. If I go into the living room, if I go right, I'm headed out to Charlie. And because there was no reciprocal, there's no way to get back in. So you decide. Sometimes these one-way paths are useful when you have someone responding. So you go forward, forward, forward. You don't want them to go back, let's say back into the road, back into the responding. So you could just use one directional, non-reciprocal. So let's take a look now. And also very important here, how you actually clear the navigation. In the walk-around maker, there is a button, clear all navigation, if I wanted to reset that. So the second way you can actually navigate, that's using the arrow navigation cluster, is use what we call location jumper. So how does a participant navigate with a jumper? You either click on it, and when it's visible, or it's invisible, they're clicking on an area that you think they're going to click on in the picture, or with timed movement. So let's take a look at that. If I go back here, and let me show you a location jumper. If I go here to, let's say, 1015 Fairfield, what you'll actually see, you see a picture at the bottom here, which is a picture of a drone. Now, what you're not seeing is, now as I use the selection rotator, you'll see here there's a green, this is an invisible location jumper. This is actually, if I click on this now, so I made that invisible. You can see here, if I make this opaque, I can go, you'll see there is the white bar there. But I made it invisible, so when someone's clicking on what they think is the picture, that's really jumping to a new location. This location jumper is just something obvious. This is a location jumper. It doesn't have that reciprocal effect. So when you click on it, it doesn't automatically show up in the target place. You have to click again. So I'm going to get rid of this. Actually, I'll leave this for right now. I'll show how actually you put this in. So let's say you wanted if I'm looking over here, so this is just something if you wanted to have hotspots in your picture. They click on something and they go there. So if I click to overhead, you'll see it's jumping to an overhead. And I can use a combination of these clusters and location jumpers. The only catch about doing too many hotspots is that if you have a few that are not clear, then your users are going to be clicking all over the place. They're not going to be sure which are hotspots and which aren't. So I really would say use this sort of hotspot thing very judiciously, where it's clear that they may want to jump to that. If I now want to move something along a time basis, let's say I want to transition this slide to another over time, what I do is I bring out my location jumper, and it just by default, it comes out as an arrow. There are different shapes, arrows, different polygons as well. And what first step here is to set move to. Where do I want to go? Now I could just say next location. That's the next location in my sequence of locations, or I can specify a particular location. Let's say I want to go to whatever this is. I'm going to go to Delta. And now what's key in here is now move on timeout. So by default, timeout is not true. So it doesn't, by default, you can click on it to get to delta. But if you set move on timeout to yes, then what you're going to do is say, okay, delay before move, let's say 5 seconds. And I can still hide this thing. So I may not want to actually show it. So I could make the opacity, bring that opacity, I'll bring it down to something like that. So we can still sort of see it there, but you'd make it invisible. So when I'm going here, now I do 4, 3, 2, 1, and there it's switched over. So that's the idea of how you can actually use a location jumper to move around timing. And if you want to move around the whole area, you can just copy and paste that location jumper set to next location. And it's really easy to put in, so you'll have it do a sequence. Now, also the location jumper, kind of like with this drone picture or the behind the drone picture, can have also move on click, which is yes or no. So you don't have to make it clickable. So that's the idea with these location jumper. Let's get back over here. We can either have it click on a click. It does not have a keystroke. That's the only catch. Or it can be with time movement. So the third and kind of last way of doing navigation is with the CTC, or sort of remote control. But this is not something that you as the designer create. This is something that you, when you're as the instructor remotely controlling your computer, you can basically pick someone up and drag him or her there. So for example, if I have this scenario right like over here, and I'll show you what it looks like. So here I have a participant in the scenario, and I have my instructor here on a different computer. Now I can move around as the participant, but the instructor can also say, okay, I want to move you over to Charlie, or I want to move you over to the first floor. So that's kind of navigation. So let's say you might, if you want to control a participant screen completely, just don't put any navigation into that simulation. And then the participant can't move, but you would be able to move the participant to whichever slide or location you want. Now, those are 3 ways of doing it. One of the interesting things that I found recently in Windows 10, kind of a fun thing, is let's say that you want to have someone move around, but you don't want them to use the keyboard, or you don't want them to use a mouse. Well, I found this Windows program called voicemacro.net, which is free, amazingly enough. It's sort of donationware, so shareware, you can support it. I know that we definitely do. We gave a nice, because it's so useful, but it is Windows 10 only. I've created a video, a 5-minute video of how to. And so it's linked, it's over here. When I record this and put it up on YouTube, I'll also put the link in here, bit.ly/SimsUshare voice. What's really cool about this, let me go over here and I'll show you. So now I'm actually going to have it run. I'm going to go and let's see if this will, of course, during the demonstration, I'm going to toggle listen here. And so now what I've done with Voice Recorder is I have made, which is very easy to do, a set of keystrokes that get activated when you say certain things. Like here, I won't say it here. Well, I could say move left, move right, move forward, move backward, and it's going to then send the keystroke, the corresponding keystroke, to whatever the current program is. So if all goes well, if I go here and say, I'm clicking on over here and I say move left. Okay, well that's not exactly right. Let's see. Let's see if I actually go over here and let's see if let me actually save this. Let me get it going over here. Okay, so we're switching over here. Now let me see, move left, move left, move forward, move back, move backward, move right. So this is really a cool way. You could actually put a microphone or have a microphone listening to your candidate in front of a screen, and that screen that person could say, move right. Well, I guess they have to actually have it set there. Move right. Okay, well, I'm still probably not, and okay, well, let's see if we say, let me see over here. I'm going there. Move left, move right, move right. So that's a pretty cool thing. Now that can be done with the keyboard navigation. That really just, it's a way of giving the computer the keys in a way that just doesn't make the user have to actually click on stuff, and frees you as the instructor up a bit as well. A little bit of getting it right, but just in terms of configuration, but a really, really simple way. Now, you don't actually have to use move left or move right. You can make up your own keywords, which is great. So you can decide, typically they say don't make it too short, but you could have a short phrase. As I say, the video that I put makes it really easy. You'll see how I did this setup voice macro right from the start of downloading. So that really is, there's a voice navigation with voicemacro.net, and there I made a video, actually really should be probably HTTPS, but you'll get that idea, and you'll see I made move left, move right, and that kind of stuff. You can certainly ask me questions if you'd like to get this set up. I think it's a really nifty feature that, especially as a free thing, could be very useful for the right situations. To summarize, what we've seen here is 3 basic ways to change locations: navigation arrow cluster, the location jumper, and then the CTC remote controlled is a way you can change, even though that's really not under the user's control. I appreciate your attention. I'm going to look for questions now, if anyone has that. Again, I have recorded this session, and this is going to be shortly available, probably by this evening or by tomorrow morning, on our webinar archive. But I really look forward to hearing what you'd like to do, reviewing things that you'd like, and possibly getting some tips from you about what works best for your user navigation. Thank you again for your attention. Please use the Q&A or the chat window if you have any questions.